Kiley Reid. I wanted to take a second just to thank Cheryl J. Family for making these fiction programs possible. And a million thanks to our host and moderator tonight, Kalia Dorsey. Kalia is a fiction writer in Penn Jr. from New Jersey. She's studying communication here and works at the Writers House as a webmaster and spent the summer covering books for 34th Street magazine. A few other notes before we start. This is a conversation and also a Q&A. So if you have questions, our dear viewers, you can put those questions into the YouTube chat, and our students, staffers, Anthony and Rachel, will pass them along to Kalia and Kiley. And if you want to see more of these virtual events, you can like and subscribe, and you'll get to hear going on. Sorry, I think we're having slight audio problems, so excuse those. Finally, I just want everyone to know that Such a Fun Age is an amazing book. And if you haven't read it yet, after you hear this conversation, you're going to want to. So you can click, and that link will take you to Harriet's bookshop on bookshop.org, and then you can buy a copy that way. We'll also share that in the chat. So without further ado, Kalia is going to introduce Kiley, and we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kalia. Kiley Reid is an Arizona native. She earned her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she was awarded the Truman Capote Fellowship and taught undergraduate creative writing workshops with a focus on race and class. Her New York Times-bestselling debut novel, Such a Fun Age, was longlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize and is currently in development by Lena, Waithe's Hillman Grad Productions and Sight Unseen Pictures. Reid lives in Philadelphia. So Kiley's going to start, and she's going to start off reading for us part of Such a Fun Age, and then we'll have a conversation followed by Q&A.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for everyone participating tonight. I wish we were there in person, but this is the next best thing, and I'm glad I can be with you all weekend. Stay safe. So I'm just going to drop you on in and start reading. Briar was a welcome break from Amira's constant concern of what to do with her hands and the rest of her life. Briar asked questions like, "Why can't I smell that?" Or, "Where's that squirrel's mama?" Or, "How come we don't know that lady?" Once, after Briar tried zucchini for the first time, Amira stood in front of her high chair and asked the toddler if she liked it. Briar chewed with her mouth open and looked all over the room as she articulated her response. "Amira, how do you know when you like it? Who says when you like it?" Amira was fairly certain that the caregiver-approved answer was something like, "You'll figure it out," or "It'll make sense when you're older." But Amira wiped the toddler's chin and said, "That's a really good question. We should ask your mom." She honestly meant it. Amira wished that someone would tell her what she liked doing best. The number of things she could ask her own mother were shrinking at an alarming rate. Amira hadn't told her parents that she was babysitting and typing for a living, which meant she couldn't tell them about the night at Market Depot. Not that they would have any insights she hadn't heard before, but it would have been nice to safely share her frustrations. In the 4th grade, a white classmate had marched to Amira's lunch table and asked her if she was a coon. Upon hearing this, her mother had promptly picked up the phone while asking Amira, "What's his name?" Amira was once followed by a sales associate in Brooks Brothers while she shopped for a Father's Day gift. Her mother had said, "They ain't got nothing better to do." And once, after a bikini wax was completed, Amira was told that because she had ethnic texture, that the total came to $40 instead of the advertised $35. To this, Amira's mother had responded, "Back up. You got what waxed?" It would have been nice to talk to her parents about the night at Market Depot, because it was honestly the biggest thing to happen to Amira in a while, and it involved her favorite little person. Amira knew that she should have been mostly disturbed by the blatant bigotry of the altercation, But more than the racial bias, the night at Market Depot came back to her with a nauseating surge and a resounding declaration that hissed, "You don't have a real job." "This wouldn't have happened if you had a real fucking job," Amira told herself on the train ride home, her legs and arms crossed on top of each other. "You wouldn't leave a party to babysit, you'd have your own health insurance, you wouldn't be paid in cash, and you'd be a real fucking person." Taking care of Briar was Amira's favorite position so far, but Briar would someday go to school. Mrs. Chamberlain didn't seem to want Catherine out of her sight, and even if she did, part-time babysitting could never provide health insurance. By the end of 2015, Amira would be forced off her parents' health coverage. She was almost 26 years old. Sometimes, when she was particularly broke, Amira convinced herself that if she had a real job, a 9-to-5 position with benefits and decent pay, then the rest of her life would start to resemble adulthood as well. She'd do things like make her bed in the morning, and she'd start to like coffee. She wouldn't sit on the floor in her bedroom discovering new music and creating playlists until 3 a.m., only to put herself to bed and think, "Why do you do this to yourself?" She'd try out a new dating app, and she'd have more interesting interests to write about, activities other than hanging out with Zara, watching old music videos, painting her nails, and eating the same dinner at least 4 nights a week, a crock-pot meal consisting of shredded chicken, salsa, and cheese. If Amira had a real job, she'd look at her wardrobe full of clothes from Strawberry and Forever 21, and she'd decide it was past time for an upgrade. Amira constantly tried to convince herself that she could find another child, a little girl with nice parents who needed her full time. They'd keep her on the books, and she could say she paid taxes. They'd take her on vacations and consider her part of the family. But when Amira saw other children, anyone who wasn't Briar Chamberlain, she felt viscerally disgusted. They had nothing interesting to say. Their eyes had dead, creepy stares, and they were modest in a way that seemed weirdly rehearsed. Amira often watched Briar approach other toddlers on swings and slides, and they'd turn away from her saying, "No, I'm shy." Other children were easy audiences who loved receiving stickers and hand stamps, whereas Briar was always at the edge of a tiny existential crisis. Underneath her constant chatter, Briar was messy and panicky and thoughtful, constantly struggling with demons of propriety. She liked things that had mint smells. She didn't like loud noises, and she didn't consider hugging a legitimate form of affection unless she could lay her head against a welcoming shoulder. Most of their evenings ended with Amira paging through a magazine while Briar played in the bathtub. Briar sat with her toes in her hands, her face a civil war of emotions, singing songs and trying to whistle. She'd have private conversations with herself, and Amira often heard her explain to the voices in her head, "No, Mira is my friend. She's my special friend." Amira knew she had to find a new job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for reading that. This is so exciting. I loved your book.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you read that passage, because one of the questions I had was about Amira's resistance to a certain kind of job, because as much as she knows that she wants a certain job, she resists the pressure to try to achieve the kind of success that someone like Alex's friend Tamra or her future boss Paula, or even to a degree Amira's own friends, think she should strive for. What went into making that kind of decision for that character?
That's a great question. Yes, there was a lot that went into Amira's kind of natural rejection to careerism. I think the first thing is her family. She is the first person to attend university. She comes from a family that is almost like artisans and very like, they have that perspective that you find something and you stick to it. I don't know if you ever saw that documentary a few years ago, Hero Dreams of Sushi. He has this perspective that in life you should have one thing that you're getting very, very good at, and that's it. And I think that's kind of where her parents are at. And so Amira, she doesn't find that thing so easily. And so I think that she thinks, okay, maybe I'll find that thing in college, but she doesn't then either. But I think that she has this really admirable thing about her where she says, I'm not just going to sell out and do some job that I hate just so I can do what my friends are doing. But that still puts her in the position where her friends are advancing in ways that she feels like, okay, well, how do I get there without, finding this thing? And yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people around her are really like, you need to find something immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Really don't like that. But at the end of the day, she's just living her life and trying to make it through. Yeah.
That's interesting because about college, obviously I'm a junior in college and we're all trying to figure out what we're going to do. And it's interesting that she says, if I was a real person, this wouldn't happen to me. When what happened to her was a racist encounter. And if she was white, it wouldn't have happened to her either. So I was interested to think about, to hear you talk more about the idea of class and her having a career as making her not susceptible to certain stereotypes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it. I think that race often does that, and also capitalism does that as well, where it makes you think it's your fault. You think, I'm sure, like as a Black person, too, like you think, if I had said this differently, if I had worn my hair differently, or if I had, you do this mental gymnastics where you make it seem like your fault, and you don't put the pressure on, well, if that person hadn't been super racist, or if this wasn't a racist system that I was trying to, get into, then these things wouldn't happen as well. And yeah, Amira thinks, oh, if I had a real job, I'd be a real person, when she's dealing with real life things all the time, and a job that is really, really difficult. And I think that that's a really human reaction. I think when those things happen, you think, oh, it's my fault. And she doesn't think like, well, my friend's dad pays for her to go to school, and my other friend's dad got her this internship, and Zara's always known what she's wanted to do. You don't think that. You blame yourself. And I think that we live in a society that puts a lot of blame on the individual, and also, when it comes to Alex, puts a lot of pride on individual actions that don't really lead to anything of substance. Yeah.
That was a good segue to questions about Alex, because I was interested in the choice to show that you showed Kelly and Alex as kids, and kind of put blame on them back then the same way you put it as they were adults. Do you think that what went into the choice of depicting them as kids and kind of not having them change as they grew up, like they really didn't change at all?
Okay. I have to thank my workshop for this. I had all of these scenes. I did the novel workshop at Iowa that's there every other year. And it was really wonderful, where I think there was 10 of us and we did a novel a week, and it kind of turned into a book club, and it was my best workshop. It was wonderful. I'm sure, not all workshops are wonderful. Really, really was. And I had all of these flashback things, alliterated to, and a lot of my classmates and my teacher just said, you need to go there. You just need to go there and show us these people and how they were. And, I don't know about you, but I feel like on one end, I feel like I've changed so much since I was first writing the novel when I was 26, and now I'm 33. And I feel like I've changed so much. At the same time, I have friends who I'm like, you are the same person who you were in 5th grade. And that's great. That's why we're still So I think that characters at the end of the novel should mentally be in a new place, and that they've taken a journey through the novel. But I also think that, unfortunately, some people do not change, and some people do change for the worse, or the way that they model their victimhood or their good intentions becomes more practiced, and they become more calculated, which is not always the best ending, but I think that happens often. And so I was interested in showing Alex and Kelly as teens. One, because it's fun to show, your characters and who they used to be. But I love showing how memory works in the novel. And that was one thing we worked on in the novel workshop, was point of view and showing these events exactly how they happened for that character and not how they happened in real life. And I do not have children. I live in an apartment, so I'm really sorry. Someone else's child. So yeah, I was excited to show in that moment, Kelly is like kind of social climbing a little bit. He's like, no, these people are cool. And then, 15 years later, he's like, oh, I was on my friend. I had to stick up for him. And, what was she doing? And that's obviously not what happened, but I truly believe that the way that we work and the way our brains work, I believe that he believes that's how it went down. And that's important to his part of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about Kelly and Alex, I went to boarding school. And so I have that idea that just made me think of that, where you say some people don't change. I went to boarding school and we were a liberal kind of school where we talked a lot about race because even if it was uncomfortable, but when it came to class, we never talked about it. And I noticed that in the book, there are a lot of scenes with money, and money isn't necessarily as taboo as we like to make it seem in the book. What are the intersections? I know you teach undergrads about race and class. What are the intersections of race and class to you? And is this a story about both of them equally, or does one take the center in your thought process?
All great questions. I'll start with the last one first, in that I feel that you cannot talk about race without talking about class. I feel like it's a moot point. And I feel that there are class indicators that contribute to how people view race. And I feel like there's class indicators that are directly from something from history from that race. And you know, even Amira in the first scene, I think that's a good example of, you have a dark-skinned woman in a grocery store with a white child. She is treated in a way that me as a light-skinned woman would not be treated. Colorism affects every part of that interaction. So race is, you can't take that out of the equation. But then there's her clothes, which are from places that, you know, someone would say isn't very nice. There's her hair, there's the way that she speaks, there's the way that she's dancing. And I think that's where class comes into play and plays off of all of those race things. So I think you have to do them both at the same time. And the way that I like to start doing, talking about class in my fiction classes is through language. I am fairly obsessed with the way that people talk about money and the way that people try to hide the fact that they're talking about money. And when I workshopped this novel, a lot of people said, this is making me uncomfortable. Why is everyone talking about money in this novel? And that's kind of one of those magic comments where you want to heed what everyone is saying, but also I wanted to lean into that uncomfortability, but shape it to how people try not to talk about money. And so it's like all of those words that when people say things like, you know, oh, she's from a good family, or he goes to a really bad school, or that's a sketchy restaurant, or, you know, all of those things are inferring income and race immediately. It's just that people don't want to act like they're saying those things. And when it comes to domestic work, calling someone a babysitter instead of a nanny is one of those things too, because you are implying, oh, this is our babysitter, we're chill, we're normal, she's cool, it's fine. You are not implying that you are another white family who's exploiting Black labor so that you can have whatever you need. And not only do you rely on her, but she relies completely on you. And I think people don't want that pressure, and it all has to do with money and race and class. And so I think those areas are so interesting because I think that they often reveal something about ourselves that we're not ready to reveal. And I'll talk about money and how much I pay for rent, anything all day long. Yeah. I have to ask you, say you went to boarding school, and one of my favorite things is the methods that people pay for things at a school. Did you have a certain, like, you know, I remember I had like a Wildcat card when I was at the University of Arizona. Did you have a special way of paying for things at boarding school?
No, everything was free on campus, and so we could stay on campus, and then everyone had a debit card if you wanted to go off campus and do something from their parents. And I think when I was a junior, they realized that that's a class thing as well, because everyone can't have a debit card. And so they gave people who were on financial aid a certain amount of money a month.
Interesting. Yeah. The way that those, I can interview you all day about this. Was there ways that you saw class show up in boarding school that you were like, oh, I was not expecting that?
Yeah, there were in small things like, oh, we're going to so-and-so's house. And so there were obviously certain people who weren't invited to that person's house, or, oh, my parents, they think you're really shy. And it's probably because you've never been into a mansion before. But I've noticed that because we were in kind of a bubble and we all stayed on campus and everything was free, and we all went to bed at the same time. We ate the same lunch and dinner and breakfast. Right. Class didn't show up in the same way. We could ignore it. And now going into college with my same friends from high school, we're all growing up and we're noticing that we like live outside of that bubble.
Yes.
And class is a real thing. Yeah.
That's a really important distinction. That's what I wanted to do for Amira and her girlfriends as well. I think a lot of schools make it seem like everyone's the same because you're all eating at the same places, you're living in the same dorm, the same classes, you're going to the same places, it's fine. And then suddenly you get out and you realize how different expectations are for what your life is going to look like. And, you know, I remember I went to school for theater and a lot of my friends were dancers. And so we were all working the same jobs and it was kind of fine. But then I remember, you know, whenever I would go outside of that circle a little bit, I remember like dating this guy who said, oh, my assistant makes $60K a year. That's not enough for anyone to live off of in New York City. Isn't that terrible? And I was like, I will have a stroke. I was like, what? It's just that difference is so amazing. And you just realize the circle that you're in has almost shielded you from even thinking about those things. But it guides everything. Money and power guide everything. And it would, you know, it behoove everyone to act like it does because it's true. Yeah.
So on the issue of money and power in class, Tamra, Alex's best friend, that she was probably my least favorite character, but she probably got me the most amped up. What was the choice of making Alex's best friend, or kind of her like black card? I feel like that's what Alex saw her as, but she was this like classist, elitist woman who was pretty rude to Amira.
That's a lot, yes. So, I'm sure as you can see, this novel is filled with stereotypes that are bent and twisted a little bit. So the friend groups have these three mirroring people on each side. And so you have like the momish friend, which is Shawnee and Jody. And then you have the kind of tell it like it is friend, which is Josefa and Rachel. And then I wanted to play with the sassy black friend character that you see so often in Zara. And I wanted to play with the magical Negro character for Tamra. And so in twisting that, I show how, you know, Alex uses Tamra as the voice of all Black people. She's like, what do I do about this? What about this? And, you know, I don't think that Alex has a hard time communicating with Black people. I think she has a hard time communicating with Black people who aren't in the same class solidarity that she's in. Her and Tamra are chill, you know, and they meet each other on that money level. And Tamra has a really high level of respectability politics that really suits what Alex is trying to do as well. And I think that that's common, not just in the Black community, but in other minority communities where someone thinks, you know, not only are you holding yourself back, but you're holding us back. And you need to want more for yourself. And your Black girl averageness is not okay. Like, we need to want more. And that's just not my idea of Black liberation. I just don't think that Black liberation is everyone wearing their hair natural. I think it's everyone wearing their hair the way that they want to wear it freely. And Tamra is not on that side. So I was really excited to put Tamra in the room with Amira. I feel like Amira kind of represents what she doesn't want from her daughters. And she's, you know, Tamra's really polished in the way that she delivers these things, and she tries to act like it's a project and everything. But she's really, really not listening to Amira. And I was excited to show, like, you know, how that can go for Alex. And I mean, if all of your friends around you are white, I mean, I think that something's going on there, especially in a city like New York. But when I was on book tour, a lot of Black women were like, oh, why did you purpose? Like, this is my mom's friend, Denise. Like, I know this woman, this exists. And I think it's important to show Black people in all of their different shades in a novel because we're just like everybody else. Yeah.
You kind of went into this. This is one of my questions about on friendship in the story, and what did you consider going into Alex's group versus Amira's group? Yeah, and how did you get those? Really, how did you think about creating their voice? Because that was my favorite part of the book, the dialogue. And how did you go about making those really fleshed out characters?
Yeah. I mean, I also have a group text that I am constantly texting. And, you know, I remember the first time I applied to grad school, one of my girlfriends designed my resume. The other one tutored me in math for the GRE. And the other one did a recommendation letter for me. And then I didn't even get in. It was so embarrassing. But they were very supportive and it ended up being fine. But I definitely am I'm benefiting from, having girlfriends support you. I know what that can do for you. And I also know that what that can do for you in terms of cultural capital. Alex's girlfriends, she met them at the doctor's office, or she met Jody at the doctor's office. And I think that that's an important small detail, that that's a doctor that Amira will probably never be able to afford to go to. And then they get to, they offer her jobs, and they offer her, places to go and live and work. And that cultural capital you cannot buy that. You have to be into it. You have to be born into it. Or if you're very, very lucky, you end up there by probably too much hard work. And so I was really excited to show how class solidarity works within friendships. But I also just wanted them to be fun and real. I think, Amira's girlfriends, I wanted to show them having fun, drinking, dancing at a party, but also negotiating for a job and pulling out calculators and being businesswomen if they need to be. I wanted to show them both sides making really bad decisions. Both of these friends are like ride or die, but also they like give terrible advice a lot of the time. And that's pretty realistic to a lot of people I
know. So about writing and being a young writer, like in college, I have a million ideas and I start all of them, but I never finish. So what do you do to finish, to go follow through with something? And how do you know if it's worth following through?
That's such a good question. So when I was writing Such a Fun Age, I had another short story that I would write when I got a little like, I don't know what I'm doing over here. I would move on to the other one. So 2 was like a good number for me. So I go back and forth between something. It sounds really cheesy, but I just feel like a project kind of chooses you a little bit. When you can't stop thinking about these characters and something is happening for you there, you're like, okay, I need to give this all my attention. That being said, especially in the beginning of Such a Fun Age, I would write every morning for about 3 to 4 hours, 4 days a week. And a lot of those days were just me like staring into space and not what I was doing. I try to not have my phone near me. I tell everyone like, don't text me, don't call me. Like, this is my writing time. And I think it's important, just even if you're not writing, just be in your head with these characters and just try and give these characters the space that they need to really grow. It's totally fine to have lots of unfinished projects. I probably have 3.5 novels I never finish, and I hope I never do because they're trash. But like, it's okay. You're getting out everything you need to get out, and you're finding out your tendencies. And it sounds so cheesy, but writing is one of those things that you can get better as you keep going. It's not like, you're going to peak at 20 and you're like a gymnast or something like that. You get to keep getting better. So as soon as like a project calls to you, I would just say, give it so much patience. Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about whenever he sits down to write, not being like, okay, I'm going to get this to 100% right now, just going slow, saying, okay, let's do 30% today. Let's try 70% the next day. It is such a process, and you just got to be really, really patient with it. Yeah.
When you were in college, did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, I thought I wanted to be an actor. Terrible idea. I really thought I wanted to be an actor, and that mode of storytelling was just not it for me. I learned that later. And I think that some storytelling techniques that I used in acting with dialogue and everything else really inform my writing now. And I wrote on the side, but I thought it was more of a hobby. And then it just took me, doing something else to realize that that's really what I wanted to do. And that's fine. I'm kind of glad that this is all happening now at 33 and not like 23, because I probably would have done some stupid things. Yeah.
Were you ever dissuaded from being a writer just for financial reasons, or you felt it was going slow?
Yes. So I applied to grad school the first year when I didn't get in. And then I ended up moving to Fayetteville, Arkansas for a year with my now husband. And I just wrote my butt off and applied to school again. And I just said, okay, if I don't get in this time, then that's it for me, because I think I applied to 16 schools and every application costs money. Some of them don't. A few of them didn't. And some of them are $50 or $60, but some of them were $100. And you also have to take the GRE, which is also another, I think it's like $25 to send to each school. And that adds up. And I was making $8.50 an hour at a coffee shop. I had another job doing copywriting. It was tight. And in talking about money in class, I wish people would talk more about, you know, the people that do make it, like the support that they had going through, because it is not easy. Obviously writing, you know, all you need is a pen and paper, but you need a whole lot of support that comes financially as well. So, you know, there's so many things, like I didn't have a child, I didn't have a chronic illness, I didn't have like other things holding me back that would be harder for other people. Money is a huge part of that, that I wish people talked a little bit more about. This is a, you know, a privileged person's game for the most part. Of course, people sneak through, which is wonderful, but I wish that the talent from more diverse people and diverse backgrounds was more available.
I agree with that. I definitely have felt like, oh, I'm slipping through. Luckily, like, how am I seeing all this? Because I'm not meant to. Yeah, like not an insider.
I was glad though, but when I went to grad school, I was 30 and I'd had jobs as a receptionist and everything. And so by the time I got there, and it was like, oh, just go to school and like write. I was like, this is amazing. Because I was like coming from 9 to 5 jobs, and that was awesome. And a lot of people coming to grad school straight from undergrad, they were like, oh, this is an extension of school and I'm just gonna like party. And it was nicer to be a little bit older and be like, you have 2 years to just write. I would just stay in your room. But you can leave with a body of work and feel good about that.
So we have a question from someone from YouTube. White men who are largely only attracted to Black women are rarely portrayed in literature. Can you talk about your process behind creating Kelly and his relationship to Amira?
Sure.
From Nia.
Yes. Hi, Nia. Absolutely. So the first thing that was most important was, you know, having the reader kind of date Kelly with Amira a little bit. And like, you know, he's tall, he's cute. The first time Amira sees him after that night, they're at a club and she's like, you know, maybe I'll see him again. Maybe I won't. I'm not trying to get married. This is fine. And then he, you know, he's cute with her. And the biggest thing that was most important with Kelly was showing moments where like I really give him a win and he says something charming and you see how much he really likes her. But then also having moments where he messes up a little bit, where you think, okay, I'm not really sure. I don't know. Let's see where this goes. And I think that that's like dating most people. You know, the problem is that everyone who talks about fetishization in the novel doesn't really describe fetishization the way that they should. But I wanted to honor how a lot of people do that. So a lot of those definitions aren't exactly correct. But I think, you know, Kelly really likes Amira. I think they get along. I think he thinks she's interesting. And I think he really does like her. The problem is that you can really like someone, but also be getting something out of the relationship that you shouldn't be getting. If you feel like you're getting this like, you know, street cred from dating somebody, that's a problem, because that's not who they are inside. And it's serving you in a way that I don't think, you know, a healthy relationship should be serving you. And so I wanted to really just stay in that tricky gray space of, well, wait, he does like her. Well, I don't know about that, you know, because I think a lot of people are there. And I'd like to think that with both Amira and both Alex and Kelly, that if Amira had met them at another time in their life, maybe it could have worked out. You know, maybe Kelly could in 3 years be like, I didn't do that right. I didn't listen to you. Like, that's not okay. But at this moment, they're not there. I think one of the problems too is Kelly is one of those people who's in, you know, his circle is a Black community, and he thinks about what that Black community can do for him rather than like, okay, how do I use my whiteness to like help the people around me? Like, let me ask them and make sure that I'm using my whiteness in a way that benefits them. He's not there yet. That doesn't mean he couldn't be there, but not there yet. Yeah.
On that note, what went into the choice of having Amira leave both Kelly and Alex? Like, she didn't turn back. Was there any hope for the future in your head?
There were so many endings too. I'm sure as you write, you will do many different endings all the time. The biggest thing was, I love rom-coms, and there's like a soapy aspect to this book as well. But the biggest thing was I didn't want it to be, will Kelly and the guy end up together? I wanted it to be, will Amira and Briar end up together? That was the biggest question, because I think that's the most heartbreaking thing for a number of reasons. It's not like, you know, maybe if Kelly sees Amira in 10 years, maybe it'll be different. Maybe if her and Alex run into each other, it'll be different. But like, her and Briar will never hit each other in this spot ever again. And I think that that's really heartbreaking. And so I wanted to really hit that hard and also pay homage to the fact that what a Black woman is making financially in her 20s is going to, affect how much she's making for the rest of her life. And so the opportunities that she's afforded are not what other people are afforded. And so I wanted to be true to that and give her a win, but also, really tell the truth for a lot of low-income Black women. Yeah.
So Amira didn't say hi to Briar at the end. In your head, do you think that, do you envision Briar as maybe being different because Amira was in her life, or just completely forgetting about Amira and being just like Alex?
Oh man, I mean, you're talking to someone who was a nanny for a really long time, and I would love to believe that my work was not in vain. Like, children will remember me, but you know what? You're right. And there's nothing that you can teach a child that they can't unlearn somewhere else. And so it's kind of funny. It circles back to your first question a little bit about how people can change or not. For me personally, when I was younger, I was super conservative, and now I'm a leftist. I've changed so much. And so I think that Briar has all of the opportunities in the world to change and think for herself and see people in all their humanity, no matter what they look like. She definitely can do that. I think anyone can do that. At the same time, Briar's going to be in an atmosphere where she, I think certain worlds will be hid from her. And she has to be curious enough to want to see how other people live. So it all kind of depends on her. This is kind of insider baseball, there was another ending that shot forward, and you saw Briar in her teenage years, but we cut that one. Yeah, I know.
Do you, I know it's set in 2016, but the idea of performative activism and Alex being super liberal and I'm woke, both her and Kelly, and then having racist undertones, if not being racist. What has 2020 made you feel reading the book again and going on tour and doing these kinds of readings?
It's been very, very interesting. I feel, this book has been out since December, and I feel that the first half of the book tour was really, it was the best. It was really lovely, and connecting with readers was really touching in a way that I hadn't anticipated. And it was more about the drama of the book and, she left her when she was sleeping and he shouldn't have said this. It was really fun and about the drama. And then with all of the Black Lives Matter protests that happened at the death of George Floyd, there was a shift, not just in my book, in the way that everyone was approaching Black art in general. And so I think it's a natural reaction that a lot of people, especially white people, see tragedy happening and they think, what do I do? I feel lost. Okay, let me go buy Black art. And we should always be buying Black art. That's amazing, because a lot of Black art is wonderful. At the same time, I think it's important to remember you can't, start equality with consumption. It just doesn't happen. Like, no power is being redistributed because you have a book on your table that you haven't read yet. That's really important to remember. But another thing is, people start approaching Black art as a pedagogical tool and say, okay, I need to learn. Here we go. This book is going to teach me something, when that was never my intention to teach anyone. Mm-hmm. I am obsessed with storytelling. I hate when books try and preach at me. I need someone to just lay it out for me and let me think what I want to think. And so I think it's difficult when people go into your book saying, okay, teach me something, when that's not what you're trying to do. I had one woman message me and she was like, oh my gosh, I'm on page 1 and the white woman is using kids' plates with dividers, and okay, I got to throw mine away. I'm trying to learn. I was like, don't throw your plates away. That's crazy. If that's not how you read a book. You don't read a book being like, okay, I'm going to do, that's crazy. My favorite books are the ones that leave me with lasting questions and haunt me a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I love seeing characters do things that I do. And I'm like, ooh, is that correct? Should I not do that? So I try and pack my book with things like that and stay true to a page turning novel. That's really important to me. Whatever way people can come to art, I think that's really wonderful. But I think it's also important to, remember that it's art and it's not a crossword puzzle. It's not your grandma telling you lessons. And I really hope that Black art can be approached that way.
Do you ever feel limited in terms of your writing? Like you just can't do certain things or say certain things because it's going to be taken the wrong way?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. That's a good one. That's interesting. I do think there are certain things that the experience of publishing a novel make me think differently about doing them. But all you can do is tell the story that you want to tell. There's moments where Alex is like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so fat," because she's 141 pounds and she's 5'10". That is a very slim person. And I weigh way more than that. I'm not 5'10", but I don't think, I think that people have a hard time understanding sometimes that my characters do and say and think things that I would never do and say and think. And so you have to decide, do you want to put this very realistic perspective of someone saying, "Oh, I'm fat," which is very, common, and risk people thinking that you're being fat phobic. And I think that the answer is to put it in as long as it's true to what you see, people doing and thinking and saying. There's a white guy who says the N-word in my book. I'm not advocating on that at all, and it's funny what people connect to. And I think that they're bringing a lot of their own history and what they just read into it as well. As long as you're telling the truth, you got to put it in, even if people are going to get mad. Yeah.
Why did Amira not say anything when he said the N-word? Was that, well, obviously it was intentional, but I feel like that was a big turn, or well, it wasn't expected for me and her character to not say anything.
I feel that a lot of times when people think of the Black experience, they think of the videos they see and, Black women saying, "Hey, this isn't okay. Let me tell you why it's not okay. I got time today. Here we go." And Blackness looks so many different ways. Like when Amira is negotiating for a job, she's Black then too. And when she's being cute with Briar, she's Black then too. And I think so much of the Black experience is disassociation. It was so interesting because you're like, okay, I'm going to pretend like I did that joke because I want a promotion, or you know what? I'm not going to say anything because it's my sister's boyfriend. I'm just going to let that go. That is a huge part of the Black experience. And it was so strange because I think 2 months after I sold my novel, that exact same thing happened to me in graduate school twice, with 2 white people telling a story and saying the N-word in front of me. One was a professor, like it was nothing. And I am not a in the moment person to react to things. I am a 2 days later, "Hey, can we talk about this? Because I didn't feel comfortable." And that's exactly what I did. And I want to show all those sides, and Amira's like, maybe I'll see this guy again, maybe I won't. Do I really want to get into this when we're on a 3rd date? I'm not really sure. So, I wanted to give Amira freedom to be passive in some areas where she needed to be, and then speak up where she felt like, okay, I've had enough.
Makes sense. Did you watch Little Fires Everywhere or read the book?
I did read
the book.
Yes. Yes, it was a while ago. Yes.
Did you watch the show?
I want to say I watched 2 episodes of it. I'm like you with starting your novels. That's how I
Did you see any parallels with the characters? Because I know that in the book, I guess race wasn't necessarily the same issue as it was in the show.
I remember, the dynamic of having a Black woman work in your house is definitely a common one that was used there as well. I don't want to speak to it too much because I think it was 3 years ago that I read it. And I think folks are like, what? I was in a weird place. I don't know if I read that one correctly. But yeah, I think it's so, so interesting because it is this thing that has been prevalent in our country for hundreds of years. And then it's the same with this menial amount of pay and no health care. And so I think that they were playing with a lot of the same dynamics, which are so ripe to just dig into. And I love Kerry Washington, so I'm sure she was great. Yeah.
When you were writing Such a Fun Age, did you think about the possibility of an adaptation?
No, I think every writer is like, let me just do this well enough so that someone lets me do it again. But when I did workshop the piece, my friend Frankie came in and she said, "Okay, I've cast your entire novel. Do you want to hear who should play who?" So that made when you're a writer, you hear a little comment and you just live on it for about 4 months or so. And so that made me think, okay, maybe there is a cinematic bend to this, which would be really wonderful because I love film. But no, I had no idea. So I'm very thrilled. Yeah.
So are you excited, or do you think that you'll get to play a big part in casting and things like that, like the production of it?
So I am executive producing, which means I come in and raise hell every once in a while. But for the most part, I am letting the experts do their thing. I really think film is such a different language, and I want to make sure that they get to, express these ideas and storylines in a way that makes sense for film. Like there's so many things like my favorite scene in the book is the part where Alex goes to Amira's apartment. And I think I love that scene because for 2 years, I had thought that moment would happen in the Chamberlain house. And then when I got there, I realized Amira would never leave her house. I have to go to Amira's house. And then it was like, okay, what does her room look like? What about this? Like, what's that thing from college that she took? And I love scenes where you just get to fill it up with stuff. And so thinking of making that scene on the page is so different. Like on film, it's just right there immediately. And I just feel like I want to trust the experts to do that in a really great way. And I'm also just hoping all of the awkward moments in the book are like unbearable on film.
Yeah. With Little Fires Everywhere and then the book versus the adaptation, I know a lot of plot points and big details were changed. Are you really attached to the overall plot and characters, or if they changed it, would you be open to that?
Both my favorite adaptations go a little bit different. What was the one? What was the one with Carey Mulligan? And oh shoot, I can't remember the name of that movie. The adaptation, I was like, oh, this adaptation is like even better than the book. That's amazing. I think that's rare. I think that the spirit of the novel, I want that to be kept. But if it goes in a different way that's better for film, I am totally okay with that. I do not want to be too precious about it. The thing that I am very precious about is the fact that Amira is a dark-skinned woman. I've seen too many where I'm like, she did not look like that in the book, and there's women that came up to me on tour, so many Black women who said, I read all the time, and this is the first time I'm reading a Black protagonist. And that is something I want to make sure that we honor in the film, that this is a dark-skinned woman in her life, and I just want to make sure that we do that part right. Yeah.
How has it felt speaking to Black women about such a fun age? Because I feel like before this summer and after George Floyd's death, there weren't many white people reading Black stories in general.
It's been really touching, and that especially a lot of Black women who are writers have said, this is the first time I can hear me and my friends talking. And I think that the way that white supremacy works is it makes you think that the way that you speak isn't literary, and that the way that you speak you can't be saying something profound or wonderful and smart and nuanced. And so I love that this book stands as an example to Black women that you can have your characters talking however they talk in real life, as long as it's true. And I definitely had agents and editors say to me, can you make this a little bit more urban, or, it's a little too Black, can you? And it's just like, it has to just fit into the world that you are creating, and that's it. And, not everyone goes into reading a book for the same reasons. Some people want to read a book where Black people are the top CEO excellent, and some people want to read a book where the ending is great. But some people just want to see, ordinary people, and that's where I'm at. And so I hope that I did the ordinary people proud in this one.
Why did you choose to set it in Philly?
Because I love it here. It's so great. I came here to see Beyonce in 2015, 14, and I'd never been to Philly before. And I think it has an it factor. I don't know. I really loved it. Immediately, I love the food, I love the houses. I just thought it was a really great place. And so I knew I wanted to base the book here. And then I did 2 trips doing research to come back just to make sure I had everything right. And in those research trips, I was like, I think I could totally live here. And so I came back, and now we live here. Yeah, I'm happy to be here too. Did
you see On the Run, or was it the Lemonade Tour?
I saw the Lemonade Tour. Were you
No, I was in Philly for On the Run 1 and On the Run 2, but I didn't see Lemonade here. I was going to say that was going to be crazy for us to be in the same concert.
Yeah, I mean, it was at the Lincoln Center. Okay, listen, I feel like I spent a lot of money on those tickets, and like it could have been Beyonce, but it could have been I was so far. I have no idea, but it was really fun. Yeah.
My mom was there, so she was in the same stadium.
I hope she bought a poncho like I did. It was pouring. It was a mess, but it was a good time. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone that's getting into writing now, especially in the current moment where it's kind of not the most normal, optimistic world to become a writer?
Yes. First thing is, my old thesis advisor, Jess Walter, always says, write to your obsessions. Whatever you're into, write about that thing. And don't trust that you are the expert. You know, if you lived in, New Orleans for 6 months, don't assume that you know everything about New Orleans. Go, buy books about New Orleans, like interview people about New Orleans, like just dive into whatever you're really obsessed with and just become because you have to, books are a long time. You have to make sure you're obsessed with it for as long as you're writing it, for after, or you have to really believe in the thing that you're writing. Read all the time, even like shit books, like make you a better writer. Cause you're like, oh, that's terrible. I'm never going to do that. Or the best thing is you say, oh, I also do that. Okay. Now I know I'm not going to do that. Reading just really, really helps. And then if you get stuck sometimes, go to your favorite things and reread that first chapter and say like, okay, what is this person doing? Why is it working this well? Let me see if I can do that too. I have so many pieces of advice. Put your phone away. Put your phone away when you're writing. Don't have it around. Even just seeing it puts your brain somewhere else. Just put that phone away and let the writing take over. Yeah.
And what about motivation? I feel like that's my biggest problem. I'm like, I'm going to write. And then it comes and it's like, I want to nap or I want to do homework or.
Yep. Okay. So I think realistic goals are key. So if you keep saying like, okay, I'm going to write more this year, that is so vague. And it's like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, hold yourself accountable and say like, okay, you are not allowed to go out until you do like this 600 word count or whatever it is. And some days you'll get out a paragraph and that's fine. And some days you'll write like all day and that's wonderful too. I think holding yourself accountable and giving yourself a little reward or not letting yourself have fun after is really, really helpful. And also I like having friends hold me accountable as well. I like to say to a friend, okay, I'm going to give you a chapter by Friday. And just knowing that she's going to ask me makes me hustle because I want it to be good. As writers, it's so easy to just be alone because you have to be really good at being alone when you're a writer, but community is so important and having people read your work is so important. And so using other people as your motivation and your alarm clock is a nice idea.
Thank you. We have another question from Jamie. Is there anything you would change about how you depicted Philadelphia now that you live here?
Ooh, that's a good one. I felt that my view of Philly would be beneficial because both Amira and Alex are newcomers to Philly. And so I wanted that like not super like knowledgeable about where things are thing about Philly for them. Now that I'm here, I guess it would just be another novel. I had never been to West Philly before and it's beautiful and I hope I live there. So maybe I would include something from West Philly. I live in Fishtown now and I think that's where Kelly would live. I really do. That part I got right. I'm trying to think. There's other places in Philly that I really like that I can see myself writing about. I think the Wissahickon Trail is really beautiful. There's definitely a vibe of when I walk down to Washington Square to meet friends. So I think maybe for another Philly novel, I'll be ready to go. But for Alex and Amira, I'm glad that I didn't dive in too deep. Yeah.
What did you have an idea of well, you kind of explained already what Amira's parents' philosophy was like, but did you flesh them out in your head, even though there weren't that many scenes of them?
That's another thing too, when you're talking about writing advice, there are so many people and scenes and everything that I fleshed out so much more than made it into the novel. But I think all of those things are really informing the novel. There were a lot of paragraphs on Amira's family. And then when it came time, it was like, okay, how much, like, what do we really need to know about this family? Let's put that in.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Amira and Alex. I had done like diary entries from Alex and other kind of journal things from Amira as I was getting to know them. And I thought that they would make it into the novel, but it was just me figuring out who these people were. An instructor at Iowa calls that throat clearing. And I think it's really important. You're just kind of, okay, let me test these people out and see what they would do. And some people will make themselves so much more known. And you're like, oh, okay, I really need to go into like, you know, Amira's friends. They weren't as big as a deal in the beginning, but some people, like her family, she's private and she's trying to make her life work in Philadelphia in a way without her family. So I felt like it was okay to not show them as much since they weren't so immediate to her.
That's another thing that I feel like I struggle with is you start with some characters and their story and then you just add little ones in. I don't even, like, I know there's a lot of advice about how to do it, but how do you do that?
You know, so often when you're writing a story and you have a lot of characters, you got to step back. And then usually you're like, okay, these two friends, I'm going to make them one. They're just doing too much. It happens all the time. It sounds silly, but it's just like, okay, what is like in service of this story? Like what is confusing? What's the most interesting part? Another thing is when I give my friends my work to read, I have very specific instructions. I say, okay, highlight lines you loved in this color, highlight confusing lines in this color. And then I like interview them after and say like, when did you get bored? What was the most exciting thing? Like, what do you like? I asked for like an Amazon review, you know, like a very basic, what did you take from this kind of thing? And it's just trying to listen to that over. This is literally not my child. I'm so sorry. Very noisy apartment. It's just listening to what the story is asking for over and over again and trying over and over again. A lot of deleted pages, a lot of frustration, but you gotta keep on trucking.
We have we have two more questions from YouTube. One is from Zuha. Do you relate to your characters at all? Do you think a writer needs to relate to their characters to be able to write about them?
I do relate to them in certain ways. So Amira and I both kind of were very different from each other, but we both had kind of like a financially precarious period in our 20s where I also didn't have health insurance. And so I definitely know how that affects how you walk through life and how you perform at your job and how you're scared about finances and how you spend your money. And so I could definitely relate to that. But at the same time, you know, Alex is, you know, she overanalyzes everything and she kind of freaks out and people like to be like, oh, Alex is so awful. And I'm like, okay, girl, everyone has stayed up late stalking somebody iPad until it gets hot on their legs. Like we've all been there. I think I can overanalyze things like Alex does as well. But I'll be honest and say when I'm writing, I'm a bit clinical and like not too emotional. And I'm just trying to figure out what each character needs in that moment. You know, no one ever says to like a sci-fi writer, like, did you go to Mars to like, what it was, you know,
yeah.
As you make it ring true, then, you know, if you can reach inside and figure out what that character is feeling, I think that's great. I don't think that you have to, you know, have killed your kids to write Medea. You don't have to do that.
And then I think it's about time for the last question. And this is from Zuha too. Do you relate to your, what's the same question?
That's okay, Zuha too. Good question.
Same question. Well, I guess the last question I can ask is, how has it been going from not getting into grad school to now having such a successful debut novel? Is it scary to write your second one?
It's not as scary as I thought it would be. I think I like a challenge for sure. And, you know, as an artist, you produce a body of work and that work stays the same and then you continue to change. And so I love that about it. And I'm so ready to write something new and to feel like, you know, see what I can do differently. You know, my dream would be in 25 years, I look back at such a fun age and I'm like, oh my God, I was such a bad writer. So much better now. Like that is always the goal. It sounds cheesy. I love writing. That's my favorite thing. It's like a math problem to me. And I love figuring out plot points and characters And so for the last novel, for everything else I've ever written, I always had, 3 or 4 part-time jobs while I was doing it. And so the fact that I just get to focus on this right now is really exciting, and I can't wait to see what happens.
I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for.
Ooh. I hope you're not muted. Oh no, am I muted too? I hope it's okay.
I got muted. I think it's time to wrap it up. I'm not sure.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.